It is officially March Madness, where everyone is making their brackets, hoping that they have the right picks to win their pool. But I'm pretty sure you're watching this video because you don't want to be like the crowd, where they will have their brackets busted before the end of the first weekend. But trust me, you don't need a PhD in bracketology in order to pick a winning bracket. You just gotta follow my 7 rules, because each round of the tournament is worth the same amount of points. So you really don't need to have a perfect bracket in order to have the best one. Rule number 1 is a little controversial, but I'm still gonna say it anyway. You should always pick the number 1 seeds in the first round. 97% of the time, they will win that game. So just pick the ones and move on. But the reason why it's controversial is because we know what happened last year. And this year, Houston is the team that I'm a little concerned about. They don't score a lot of points, and they don't shoot great percentages. That is a bad recipe for March Madness. And they're also playing Longwood, which is clearly the best of all the 16 seeds on the bracket. Just take my word for it. And I'm still taking Houston on my bracket, but I figured I should warn you. Rule number 2 is to always pick the matchups, and don't get too focused on any one specific team. You really won't know who you have as your national champion until you pick your way through the entire bracket. And remember that the Final Four is a war of attrition where only the strongest survive. I'm going to spend a bit of time focusing on the next few rules because you deserve to know the truth about this year's field. Rule number 3 is to know all the names of the teams at the top of the bracket who actually have a chance to win, because the most important thing for your bracket is to pick the national champion correctly. So here are all the teams that actually have a chance to cut down the nets. And spoiler alert, the list is incredibly short. UConn is legitimately the best team in the tournament, and trust me, I ran the numbers. Even if you don't consider strength of schedule, they're way better than everyone else. That said, they could still lose a game, but it's probably going to be to another team I'm about to mention. Arizona is technically a 2 seed, but they do just about everything you would need to do to win a national title. That means they're the type of 2 seed that could knock off a number 1, and UNC has just about as good a shot as anyone to win it all. They don't really have any glaring weaknesses, but they're not quite as good on the numbers as the 2 teams I just mentioned. But when it comes to Purdue, I'm pretty sure that their history is likely going to scare some people off of picking them. But as far as the numbers go, I don't want to admit it, they're still one of the absolute best teams in the tournament. So yes, if that actually holds, they could cut down the nets. Gonzaga is very legit. The only bad thing about them is their seed, and that means they're going to have a pretty tough road to even get to the Final Four, and that starts as soon as the first round. Auburn is pretty good at everything that you would want from a tournament team. They're just not actually great at any of it. And as far as a team like Creighton goes, the numbers say there's no reason to believe they can't win it all. But I'll be honest, I still don't believe they actually will. If you were keeping score at home, those were 7 teams that I just mentioned. But I'm gonna give you one more, because I'd be lying if I didn't actually say it. Yes, Houston could technically win. There's enough evidence to suggest it. But it's going to be a heart attack watching them play just about every game, because they're all going to be really close, and like I said, it could even start in the first round. Who you choose from that list is entirely up to you, because any one of those teams could lose on their road to the Final Four, but it's only likely to happen when they're playing another really good team. That includes all the teams I just gave you, and the ones I'm about to say. That is rule number 4, to know the names of all the pretenders. So here are all the teams that could mess it up for somebody else, but there's no real reason that they're going to actually cut down the nets. Alabama scores a whole bunch of points, but plays absolutely no defense. Need I say more? And Iowa State simply doesn't rebound the ball well enough, and it's going to catch up with them at some point. Tennessee is an overseeded team and doesn't rebound particularly well. And history is telling us from their conference tournament performance that they're not good enough to hold up for 6 games straight. And Duke has many of the same problems that Tennessee does. The only difference is they're not overseeded. And Illinois is my 5th and final pretender. They obviously know how to play basketball really well, but they also don't defend as well as they should. It's probably going to catch up with them at some point, and the funny thing about the pretenders is they're just as likely to mess it up for the champions as they are to mess it up for themselves and get upset. Which brings me now to rule 5, which is the hardest thing for most people to do, which is to take a chance on some legitimate upset picks, because ignoring the teams that you don't know much about is actually how you bust your bracket. because an upset is so much sweeter when you called it before it happens. But I also need to clarify that all upsets are not the same, because sometimes the underseeded team is actually supposed to win. I don't know what the selection committee is doing, but it's not always seeding the teams based off of who's actually better. And I know this because I run the numbers on a spreadsheet for every single team in the tournament, for all the metrics that I care about, and then I include strength of schedule. And some of the teams that are like 12 seeds on the bracket are actually better than the 5 that they're matched up with, even when strength of schedule is taken into account. And they also have more wins. Fortunately, I did all the homework so you don't have to. So I'm not going to talk about the numbers that much, but I'm going to break these upsets into 3 categories. The ones that technically could happen, those are the good upset picks. The ones that probably should happen, those are the better upset picks. And the ones that are supposed to happen, those are the best upset picks. And of course, I'll give you those 2 teams at the end. So as far as the good upsets go, Samford could technically beat Kansas, and they're also missing a star player now. Western Kentucky could also beat Marquette, because stranger things have happened. But Longwood, if you really want to pick a 16, is the team you need to go with, because I tried to tell you a few times already, Houston is looking kind of shaky. I would give all those teams maybe a 10 to 15% chance at winning. So if you really want to go with a team that nobody else is going to have, you could do worse than to pick them. But hey, it's your bracket, not mine. Ironically, my 2 upsets in the better category are both going up against teams out of the WCC. McNeese State out of the Southland drew Gonzaga out of the WCC. The strength of schedule for McNeese is really the biggest knock on them. There's nothing else on the numbers from the games they actually played. But Gonzaga is a really good team. So hey, I'm giving them maybe a 30% chance of pulling it off. But Grand Canyon playing St. Mary's is a game that I say could go 50-50. Just take my word for it. Grand Canyon is a really good team that you probably just haven't heard about. But here are my 2 upsets for the best category. I'm starting it off with New Mexico, because they are supposed to be Clemson. They're the better team on all the numbers that we have to go off of. And yes, I did consider strength of schedule. They also score the ball and rebound just about as good as anyone. But I did say there was another team on my best list. James Madison is the upset that basically everybody should see coming. They've won 31 games on the season. Just let that sink in for a moment. On top of that, on the numbers, they're one of the best teams in the nation. The only thing holding them back is this whole strength of schedule thing that we like to look at. I'm not saying they're going to make the Final Four like FAU did last year, but I am saying I would not be surprised if they pulled it off, because when you look at the stat report, they look like about the same team. FAU was supposed to win most of those games last year. The only reason you didn't think so was because of their seed, and that's it. As for any other team that is seeded between 12 and 15, they've still got about at least a 5% chance of winning their first round game. It just means that if I didn't say their name, they're probably in that category. It's your bracket, not mine, so do with those teams what you want. Which brings me now to the next rule, which is to always hedge your bets on your upset picks. That means, for any team seeded 12 or below, cancel out that upset by having another team beat them by the end of the Sweet 16. Even if you get your upset pick wrong, the team that you had to cancel them out will still have a way better shot at beating the top seeded team that they're likely going to face in the next round. Keep in mind, you're not trying to have a perfect bracket, you just need to have the best one. This strategy is what's kept my brackets alive while also giving me some great upset picks, like Yale over Baylor, or even Florida Gulf Coast when they beat Georgetown years ago. Which brings me now officially to Rule 7. Don't worry that much about the teams seeded 4 to 11. I'm not saying that they don't matter, but for the most part, statistically speaking, those teams aren't going to be cutting down the nets. So just do whatever you really want to with those picks. Think of it this way, they're all just going to keep beating each other up and knocking each other out until the Titans are left standing by the Final Four and beyond. And beyond these 7 rules is one thing you need to remember. Don't try to pick a perfect bracket. Just try to be good. Because if there is an upset that you don't have on your bracket, the chances are, if you listen to my rules, nobody else is going to have it either. So as a result, it's not going to affect you much in your bracket pool if the way the point scores fall. If everyone else lost those points, including you are still in the running to win your bracket pool. Picking the winning bracket is clearly everybody's goal, but the will to prepare to win. That's what bracketology was invented for. And it's also why I do the homework so you don't have to. So you should now have everything that you need to pick a winning bracket. And you can just thank me later when your bracket is the only one left standing.